If
you would do me a favor. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Kedlick. Mr. Kedlick has been kind enough to bring us the U.S. inflation rates 2012 through 2022. It's quite a change.
I forgot to say, this is from the U.S. Department of Labor. I did not make these graphs.
Thank you, from the U.S. Department of Labor. Okay, we'll move on to our second agenda item, which is Superintendent Mr. Light was going to speak to us this evening. Welcome. Any place you'd like to be. You can sit with us if you'd like.
Nobody ever wants to do that.
No, no.
Yeah, good evening.
Thank you.
So, I always appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. Dave Verdolino was going to be here, but he could not be here last minute. Something came up for him, so he does send his regrets. And I know he loves doing this because there's nothing more in life he enjoys than talking about finance. And if you've ever watched our presentations, you know it. I will add, he's also very, very good at it. I think what we wanted to come tonight was a request of Finance Committee members, I think, just to be able to talk through a little bit of the requests that we submitted to the Select Board regarding ARPA and this second round of funding. I think if you recall, the Select Board had allocated $1.5 million initially to the district, which was broken down for $1 million in FY22 and an additional $500,000 for FY23, and then they had indicated that they had held about $500,000 in reserve for future determination. And so as we were putting together the requests to the Select Board, we used that about a $500,000 number to be able to, develop a request list for future consideration, and we've submitted that to the Select Board. We also used the opportunity to, as we've worked with the town, we've thought about how the funding works and also how documentation through the process works. And what we became aware of is that, a lot of small requests that then add up to a big number don't necessarily make a lot of sense from the federal government's requirements over how we document everything. And so what we did work to do was streamline some of the requests into larger items that were just easier to document, which obviously just means that we have to shift some things around inside our operating budget to make sure we're getting to the same total big number at the end. The requests that we were looking for, in addition to the $1.5 million that was allocated between FY22 and 23, were really four main areas. One was continuation of funding to this revenue replacement for our community education revolving accounts. This was by far the account in the district that took the biggest hit during the pandemic. We continued to operate things like extended day childcare during the day at reduced or no cost to families during the pandemic. As well, we had to really stop all of the programming that brought in revenue into our schools for adult education and evening activities. And so, they continued to incur expenses in that for community education, but did not have the revenue source. So we're looking at revenue replacement for that for $150,000. We also have been in touch with the state, both for, schools in the school in Blanchard, but also all the schools in Acton don't currently meet all of the requirements of the new E911 law. So when we dial emergency services from our school, it does not yet tell the actual location or classroom number within a school. And so that's something that by law needs to be upgraded. We used the new building project as the backbone for a district-wide telephone system. So that building, the Boardwalk campus, is all set now and meeting current requirements. Blanchard also worked off of that over the summer. So Blanchard is at code, but we do need to replace the telephone system throughout the rest of the district. I see some puzzled looks. We are still on an old copper telephone line system for the school district and are not on the new IP telephone systems. So that's a second request that we had. The request amount is less than what we know the total cost to be, but again, we're working within what we know was kind of the allocation from the select board originally, which is why we requested $150,000. I think we probably still have about $400,000 to $500,000 total to upgrade all of the schools. Mental health services, we're working with a new vendor this year to provide expedited mental health services to students. This is a startup company. If you are aware of kind of the current state of mental health services for adolescents, it's not atypical once a student needs support to have them be on a waiting list for up to 6 months. The new vendor we're working with is actually guaranteeing that if our school makes a referral, they will have their first visit within 7 days, which is a huge service to Acton and Boxborough students. We would like to continue that service into next year, so we're requesting the $150,000 for that. And then we have about $50,000 set aside for some wraparound services to provide social work and in-home mental health services to families in the district. And so that is really where we're coming up with the $500,000 request that we submitted. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us. I'll open it to questions from the committee. Go ahead, Mr. Cole.
Mr. Superintendent, you've been working on that E911 system at the school since long before you were superintendent. I know this because I actually had to recuse myself because the company I used to work for 7 years ago is the company that does this business. I obviously have not been keeping tabs, which is why I'm so caught off guard that this isn't done yet. I'm shocked that this isn't done yet. There's been plan of record for at least 7 years.
Yeah, I know, and we went through the entire capital plan with capital sub, and this was not on the list that we received at the time. So I can't really speak to what happened before I was here, but I know this has been on our radar for a couple of years now, but we just haven't had the revenue to really be able to launch this. And I think in particular, the cost of the infrastructure for it is significant, and to be able to pair that with state reimbursement through the new building project, I think made, financial sense as well for us. And so, we have known about it for a few years, but we also were kind of planning to be able to use the new building as the launching pad for it.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Newman?
Sure. Peter, the mental health services vendor, have you checked references? 7 days is quite a thing to say in this current environment of mental health services. Like I said, I have a daughter who's in that field, and, she's not taking new clients and hasn't for a long time. So how do we know this outfit's as good as their word?
Yeah, that's certainly something we looked at early on. It's certainly something that's new for us, and we're watching over the course of the year. The credentials of the startup are, so far impeccable. The chief operating officer actually was one of the authors of the Surgeon General's report on adolescent mental health. They're affiliated with Harvard. Particularly the business school, but in conjunction with the School of Education, they've done some work. And then, similarly, their chief medical officer that they assigned to us has been, both at Mass General Hospital and Newton Wellesley, and is a very well-known adolescent psychiatrist. And they've put together a fantastic team for us that can accept up to 50 different referrals a month. Okay. So, yeah, we did a lot of work to try and vet this, but because it's a startup, it was also one of those things that it was a unique opportunity for us, and sometimes you have to take a little bit of a chance for the reward that could come.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, so just to be clear, so to make sure that I know where we're standing from, we have $1.5 million that was allocated or slated for, earmarked for this school in 23 out of ARPA, and $500,000 that was on waiting for 24. And what you're going to be asking the select board for is to have that $500,000 moved up into 23 for the costs outlined, or you're asking for an additional $500,000 from the select board in 23, and then still hoping to hold on to $500,000 in 24?
Yeah, no, this would complete the district's request. So, this would bring our total request for ARPA up to 2 million, which was what we had originally requested through the process last year.
And so your hope is to get it all for 23 to help with the costs that have already moved down the road, with the exception of the psych ed and the telephone system.
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, the telephone system is something that we would start in the spring. I don't think we're very specific as to the exact fiscal year that we need that in. I think if it's made available to us, we can certainly start some of the work, but some of these requests are certainly for FY24.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And we do thank you for coming, and thank you for your time, and keep up the good work. If there's anything else you want to share with us about the schools before you head out, you're welcome to speak. You have the floor before you go.
I would just say that, we have sent out some invitations, and I want to make sure that you all know you're invited. We have the grand opening of the Boardwalk campus on October 15th, which is a Saturday morning. The ceremony will be at 9:30, and then we have some student-led tours going out for the couple hours after that, so that people can, get a sense of the school, come together as a community. This is really, an event that we're thinking of more as a thank you to the community for all of the support for this school and all the citizens. So we're hoping to make sure that, the whole community knows about that and knows that, everyone is welcome. So please feel free to join us. We would love to have you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is Town Manager John Mangiarotti is also going to speak about ARPA and updates from the town. Welcome.
Nice to see you all. Thanks for the invitation to talk about the ARPA program. This is something that I'm pretty excited about, how we've been able to use the funding from the American Rescue Plan Act so far, and I think there's some pretty interesting options for the board to consider to close out the investments that we can make with this exciting $7 million funding. So I just have a couple things I wanted to go over. Just as a kind of reminder, we received just over $7 million from the American Rescue Plan, 2.4 from a direct municipal allocation, and 4.5 from a county reallocation. So that's 7072733 is the total amount. That excludes funding that went directly to the district under ESSER 3, which was one of the additional ARPA programs. Last year, we did a stakeholder and a pretty robust needs assessment and community engagement to sort out how the select board's needs and the community's needs align with what we think we can invest this funding in, and we developed an investment plan. That plan was approved in October. It included 24 investments for FY22 and 23, equaling approximately $5.1 million, and then nearly $2 million was held in reserve for future years. Some of that reserve was sort of earmarked, but with the understanding that, around this time, which is what we're doing, we're going to look at the whole thing all over again. So some of the projects that were completed, or I guess a little bit of an update. Some of the things were, revenue replacement, childcare subsidies, investments in public housing, sustainability, wastewater infrastructure, PFAS mitigation, playground renovation, HVAC improvements, online permitting system. One of the things that we had to do because of this federal funding was to develop a process to be able to comply with the federal audit. And so we had an application process. We worked with, if it was a town entity, we worked with them. If it was an outside entity like the school district or the water district, we had to create a formal process to create sub-recipient agreements. So that was a lot of work. The $1 million was already spent and distributed to the district. $450,000 for the water district is still being sorted out. They were still working on the procurement to meet the federal requirements. We used $265,000 for revenue replacement, and some of the other funding is still being worked on. So on August 22nd, about a month ago, I gave an update to the board on sort of where we are with all those projects, and they asked me to do another round of stakeholder engagement, which we've done. and have another comment period, which is pretty much concluded. There was a public comment period at the last Select Board's meeting and the one prior to that. There'll be another one on October 3rd, and then the board will be making a decision at the second October meeting. So I'm here tonight to kind of give you an update, and I know that the Select Board would very much appreciate any input that the Finance Committee has on the projects that are currently on the docket for consideration. So basically, all the things that were requested last time are sort of still requested if they weren't allocated, and then there's about $10 million worth of new requests. So I have that sheet printed out for you, which I can hand out right now.
Thank you. Is that the same one that was sent on the 13th, or are there new changes since then?
This is as of this afternoon.
Thank you.
So it's brand new. I mean, it's not drastically different, but I added the numbers. So I'd like to just run down this list, and I can give you a Twitter version of each one, or I can give you a more extended version. What's your preference?
Probably the Twitter version. And then we could ask questions if there's more specifics. So those of you fellow FinCom members that are saying that the sheet is reorganized compared to the one we were given on the 13th, do you have a preference for how he goes through these? Whether he goes through the order that's on the 13th or the sheet that he's got? Okay.
Yeah, I just figured, yeah, I understand. I tried to number them again and put them by category, which I think last time it was hard to follow how things were aligned. Anyways, so you just heard from Superintendent Light about the project R1, which was the additional $500,000 to make the total district allocation $2 million. We've spent money on administration through, as I mentioned, all the processes we have to set up. We're looking to add more of that. If we don't, we'll just pay for it out of the finance budget, but I think it'd be better if we could pay for it from this. The Acton Housing Authority is, as you know, working on their 40-unit senior housing project, and as part of the financing, the state is saying, hey, we'd really like to see more of a local contribution to that project. And we said, well, we've already provided a grant, we've used grant funding to help with the sewer extension and several other things. So that's what this ask is. It's for the town to contribute more towards that project. R5 is the Kelly's Corner water main construction for the Acton Water District. They are funding the cost of the new water mains throughout the project as a non-participating item in the $18 million investment that the state is making in it, that the state is not going to pay for the water mains, so the water district has to pay for those themselves. It was something that was in their long-term plans to do anyways, but the timing of this project has required it to happen now. And with escalation that occurred, the cost has increased more than they thought it would. R6 is also from the Water District. They had initially requested $2 million to help with PFAS mitigation measures at the North Acton treatment plant. The board allocated $450,000 last year. Approximately $30,000 of that has been spent so far, and they're still working on some of the early phases of that, and they're requesting another $550,000 to complete that design work. R7 is $500,000 was allocated to make air quality and HVAC improvements to public facilities, and this would be extending that further for another $500,000. These are items that are in our 10-year capital plan, and this is just an opportunity to fund them through ARPA. R8 is the ASA Parlin House project. This is a project that received funding last year. It's shown here as a request for additional funding, although I'm probably not going to recommend that the board pursue this on the 3rd, just because there's some still work we need to do on that. We also have a federal earmark that may be forthcoming, so we want to see what happens with all that before we add to that investment. No, R9 is Nara Park. This is something that's always part of our capital plan, is to continue to make accessibility improvements to the amenities at that park. R10 is a new project. It's the development of a senior center cafe. There was an open house there today at the 30 Sudbury Road facility, and this project would create more of a standing cafe that would be available, and it's not just a congregate lunch that they have. Any questions, or you want me to keep going?
Well, I see there's some, still some big ticket items, but those seem to be more update rather than further request. Does that seem fair to say?
No, I just wanted to stop after 10, but I'll keep going.
Gotcha. Any preference from the committee?
I just have, you can go through it all, we can ask questions at the end, might be easier.
Okay.
Or I have a question now for one of them, but,
You know what, let's stop at 10. Ask if you have a question about the first 10 while it's fresh on your mind.
so John, the air quality in public facilities, do we have a list of a pecking order for what facilities you're looking at targeting and what dates, what years?
Yeah, so we did an electrification roadmap. We got a grant to do a roadmap of the big 3 energy users, which are this building, the PSF, and the library. Those are the buildings that use the most energy on the town side. And so we'd be focusing on updating the systems in those buildings to electrify them and to make them more efficient.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just ask on R6, the PFAS mitigation. I know we had the water board in here months ago. Is the idea that the town could put the ARPA funds towards that system, but if that wasn't approved, then it would be passed through user fees, just raising rates on users? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, so again, it's not within the purview of what we do here, but my understanding is that the construction of the improvements would have to be paid for by the ratepayers through whatever means they do that. This would just help fund the design. And so whatever portion we don't fund of the design, they would include with whatever revenue they're using for the construction.
I think that's right. I wasn't sure about that. Thanks.
Ms. Anderson?
Hi, John. Watched the last select board meeting and was very interested when the water district pointed out the significant difference in their initial estimate on the cost for the materials for the Kelly's Corner water main replacement compared to what it is. They said they originally thought it was going to be 1.7, and their most recent estimate is 2.4 million, and that's driven by material costs. I would love to know, just for any of these projects, whether any of them have had updated estimates since they were first proposed. I would hate for us to get into a project and find out that there wasn't enough funding to complete it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, with the way that the construction industry has been over the last few years, you'll see later where we're talking about R20. The majority of that request is related to escalations that have occurred in a project that we had going on at that plant. The other ones in here are generally pretty current in terms of estimates. They're all current, but I think that one is a particular one that had an escalation issue.
Also, around the senior center cafe, that sounds to me like we would be effectively going into the business of running a restaurant. Is that the proposal?
I think that it's something to that effect, yeah. So it would be a limited menu available to the seniors or anyone that wants to go there. And the idea would be to create a place that people want to be more than just the half-hour lunch that they're there.
Mm-hmm. So would that be subcontracted? Is that the idea? Or would we be, I'm trying to figure out if the town is going to go into the restaurant business effectively here, or what the plan is. My understanding is this 100K you have is startup costs.
Yeah, there would be ongoing costs that, in addition to this, that would come afterwards that ideally would be self-sustaining, but likely wouldn't, at least in the beginning. So yes, it's a startup. There'll be ongoing costs afterwards, either through staffing or through a contractor.
Thank you.
Mr. New?
Yeah, John, refresh my memory. McManus Manor is the one on Main Street.
Yeah, where the Kennedy landscaping is right now, yeah.
So haven't we already contributed a lot of money to that as a town?
Well, that's an interesting question, if that was a question.
That is a question. I could make it a statement, but I'd rather make it a question.
Yeah, it's both, I guess. But so the CPC, town meeting, appropriated CPA funds.
Right.
I believe $1 million. The P&S, the purchase and sales agreement that we have with them, requires them to pay the town $1 million. So the state is saying, so is the town contributing to this project or not? And so that's why I think that the AHA is asking for additional assistance, just to kind of make that clearer to the other funders, to know that we are in this and we're committed to it. I mean, we can explain the reason why and the fact that free cash was used 8 years ago or whatever to buy it, but that's a long conversation to have.
And if I may, on the water main construction for Kelly's Corner, a similar question to what Dave said, since as I drove by today, I saw the construction starting next week. Is this issue with the water mains going to disrupt the construction schedule? I assume the water district's going to have to do some sort of capital surcharge or something if this is not funded through this route.
So I don't follow exactly how they finance projects there, but I believe that they would fund it either way. And this is just wondering whether the town wants to contribute the ARPA. And I don't believe it'll impact schedule because it's going to be a multi-year project, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think water mains are first.
In the past, they either issued debt or something, and recently they made a capital surcharge to everybody's rate to pay for debt that they are issuing. So I would think in this amount of money, this in the PFAS, they'd issue some debt and put in a surcharge to pay for it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cole?
Your instinct of not wanting to recommend the $400,000 for the not Ace of Parlin house, I heartily recommend you go with your instinct and not pursue that money. I know we're only looking at the first 10, but I'd like to speak to the whole list. I'd say that since you're oversubscribed, I think one of the items that I would look at this list for as a guiding principle is that, to go back to what the previous FinCom member, Doug Tyndall, thank you. What Doug always used to say is we should be paying attention to health and safety first. And so anything that is not clearly health and safety maybe is a want and not a need. So, I'm more than happy to go through all 33 of these and say whether I think they're health and safety or not, but I definitely think that you should use that as a lens to look at some of these items. For example, HVAC systems probably is something that has to do with health, because we've seen time and time again during COVID, you've got to have clean air, you've got to have the right things. Some of these other items, a study for a new sewer where there never was one before, that's not going to qualify on my list as health and safety. So
I'm happy to go through the rest of the items if you'd like.
So just want to point out that I'm looking at this, since you're overscribed, I'm definitely looking at some guiding principles about what to use to help cut down to the $2 million you have left, provided you have even $2 million left. I agree with Ms. Anderson that with 24 projects that are already in the hopper, there may not be as much left as perhaps we'd all would like to see.
Any other questions on the first 10? I would just bring up 2 questions as follow-ups on the air quality project is listed as an air quality and HVAC project, but then when you just spoke about it, you mentioned it as a energy consumption reduction project. I assume they go hand in hand, same topic, but is it specifically one or the other?
We'd be looking at comprehensive overhauls of the systems that are used to manage the air in the building and at the same time electrifying it. So I guess you could look at it as an air quality and a environmental improvement project.
Okay, and then with regard to the cafe, or is it going to be a cafe idea or a cafeteria idea for the senior center?
So it would utilize the existing cafeteria and kitchen setup that's there, but operate it more as a cafe with hours of operations where food would be served and sold at a reasonable price, and to create kind of a place for seniors and others to go and congregate and have a little bit different menu options than the congregate meals that we do, which are okay, but I think the idea would be to make it something a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, so my question then would be, what are we doing with that food facility at the moment? Do they serve 3 hot meals a day, or is it just there waiting to be used?
So we currently serve a daily lunch, which I'm referring to as a congregate meal. We also run the Meals on Wheels program out of that kitchen, which brings food to a few hundred, I believe, households every week, so the kitchen staff would create the meal packets, and then volunteers come in and bring it all around town to different people, households in need. So it's used now. I think this is just a way to use it more.
Sure. And is it currently any kind of a pay-for-service use, or is everything that's being provided now already included in some other revenue source?
Everything that it's being used for now is either free or a very nominal fee for the people that use it.
And
I think it's cost $1 or $2 for lunch,
okay,
things like that.
And so the new idea that's being proposed and asked for startup money for, would that be a pay-for-service as, like you
Yeah,
said?
it would be, they would
for?
sell, egg sandwiches for something reasonable.
Great.
For example.
All right, let's continue with maybe another 10 and then maybe the last 13 or so.
Okay, so R11 is to create an outdoor meeting space for the public to use. R15 is to continue the work on the DPW feasibility study and really focus on the needs related to design and permitting for a new fuel depot. This is just a design, $250,000. The cost would be a lot more than this, but we're starting to understand that regardless of what we do with the Public Works building, the fuel depot will need to be replaced, and we'd like to do it in a thoughtful way, incorporate it into some kind of bigger picture design work. This is something that's used by the town departments, it's used by the regional school district, it's used by the CASE program, and somebody else uses it. So it's pretty heavily used by the entire community. And the $250,000 would advance us through the design process. That is a health and safety matter because the permits for the tanks and the systems expire in a few years. I don't know the exact dates, but they're nearing end of life. The next item, R16, is response to many calls that we've received for people to have a service related to tenant advocacy. And this is a placeholder amount where I think a program could be piloted to see how it works. And if it's successful, then lead to a future budget request. R17 is continuing the emergency rental assistance program that we've been running now since 2020. R18 is to continue the child care subsidy program that we've been running since around 2020. This is helping families go back to work by providing help with child care It helps with tuitions to places like community ed and to some of the other daycare programs that we have in town. R19, this would be the cost to connect the McManus Manor project to the existing municipal sewer system. This is a project we have a design for, and we are moving along in the design process. And this is $1.5 million to make that connection. Coincidentally, that would be a way to contribute to the McManus Manor, even more greatly than what was requested above, if we're able to move forward with that. R20, as I mentioned earlier, the South Acton Wastewater Treatment Plant, I think it was 2021 town meeting, approved a rehabilitation project for the wastewater plant. It wasn't to expand it, it wasn't to do anything other to replace and start replacing all the infrastructure in that building that's nearing the 20-year mark and rehabilitating it. What we found is that when we went out to bid, the bids came in higher than what we had for money. So we actually had to go back out to bid and then make a bunch of different things at alternates and exclude them. They weren't things that were mission critical. They were pump station upgrades, which would have been nice to do all at once. But we pulled them out to make sure that we could get the main plant project done. So 800,000 of this 1.3 is to bring those pump station projects back into the fold and complete that work with the contract that we have now. Included in the 1.3 million is also $500,000 requested to continue the work that we're doing to study the discharge, to increase the discharge capacity of the plant by adding another rapid infiltration basin on the Adams Street site. If you drive down or walk down High Street, you'll see those on the right there. And we are working on a plan to add another one kind of on the other side of the building where you can't see from the road. That's expensive, and $500,000 would help us do the design and permitting, and then we'd have to find a grant to do the actual construction. R21, this is a project that we've been working on. The select board has approved the design for, and I think we've completed, this is the Hayward and Main intersection. We've completed designs at 25%, had a public forum, and we did 75%, had a public forum. And so we're just now in the process of completing the design, and the cost estimate is approximately in a range of $1 million to do that project. R22. So in the initial allocation, $100,000 was allocated to do a wastewater solutions study to help the Great Road Commercial District. Great Road, we did a study on Great Road, and we've identified a few things that the businesses need there to be more, to have economic development and growth. And one of them was sewer or better wastewater capabilities. So this study, and we actually had the kickoff meeting this morning, they're going to look at the entire corridor, identify ways that we can either do package treatment, like smaller package treatment plants, or connect or find other alternative solutions, or the other solution is connect to our existing wastewater treatment plant. And so that work would continue with additional funding requested at $300,000. R23, that's actually been withdrawn. We have another idea for that one. R24, this is just continued work that we're doing on complete streets. R25, this is something that's been in the capital plan for a few years as simply a resurfacing. But as we looked at it, we really thought that some redesign work was necessary and total reconstruction is necessary. So that's why it's increased to 600,000. There's a lot of things about this parking lot that aren't desirable as a pedestrian in terms of accessing the library and the town hall and the playground in the back. And what we'd be looking to do is to fix a lot of those things by redesigning it, adding a pedestrian, almost like a pedestrian plaza in front of the main library entrance behind the building instead of a driveway to keep cars from whipping by the entrance as they do, and some other improvements. The goal here would be to have equal or more parking spaces, but also make it safer. And so that project is something that's on the capital plan, and it's in here with a recent cost estimate in the range of $600,000. R27, this is the continuation of a project that was allocated funding for earlier. This is Nagog Treatment Plant. That's a privately owned system that is actually provides wastewater for a bunch of businesses and homes in North Acton. And this was really looked at as an economic development project because it's increasing or improving the treatment capacity of that system to make sure that the businesses that are there can stay there, and then we can add more. And they're looking for $150,000 more for I&I work. R29 is just a financial revenue replacement, which we've done before, and we propose to continue doing that as is shortfalls. Fortunately, right now, there aren't any revenue shortfalls, but this is a placeholder in the event that we do have them in the next few years. R30, as I mentioned, we completed the building electrification roadmap. We've also recently completed our climate action plan, and in that plan is millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of projects over the next 8 years that we're interested in pursuing to achieve our goals of reaching net zero by 2030. And so $500,000 would be a way to advance many of those efforts. R31 is continuation of a program that is actually launching in January, where we would provide grants to businesses and residents to help with energy efficiency projects. R33 is another bus to run a second fixed route bus for the CAT. That rounds out the new request, equaling $10.5 million.
Okay. Questions? Ms. Anderson?
Specifically on the second CAT bus, I was looking at the ridership numbers, and I know that Franny Osmond at the select board meeting was very excited because of the numbers being up around 400 people a month taking it. But if you look back in 2020, for the month of July, that was almost, can't read it, looks like it's 1,600 riders in that month. Were we previously operating 2 CATs? Would this be a shift back to when we had a much higher ridership?
So no, we've never had 2 fixed route buses before. We did have several shuttles that picked up people in places and brought them to the commuter rail, which we're not running at all right now, which I guess you could say were fixed route, but the CAT has a fixed route every day, 8 to 4 or whatever it is, and we've always only had just one of those. Yeah, the numbers haven't come back from before the pandemic, and we're not really sure what the public transportation and even the parking program looks like going forward. Our parking lots are still not seeing cars in them. We have 500 spaces in South Acton for the train station, and I don't think we've hit that mark. We used to be full every morning, right, by 7:30, and I don't think we've hit that since 2020, and I don't know that we've come close. So, we're continuing to evaluate what that means. A lot of the transportation that we had was to get people to the train station because there was no parking. And without that issue there, we're continuing to understand what investments in transportation should look like. So this would be an idea. The idea is if you run a second bus, that more people would use it. And I think it's probably true. More people would probably use it if you ran a second bus. And I think that's the proposal.
Was it looked at whether to just extend the hours of the current route? Because it doesn't happen at very useful times if you're going to especially use it in lieu of in replacement of the shuttle bus. That doesn't happen anymore. But it's a very limited time range. Is it 8 to 4?
I don't know the exact operating hours, but it's 8 hours a day, so it's probably something like that, yeah.
Because an additional vehicle and related infrastructure and drivers, et cetera, is a large ongoing cost to incur. It just wasn't clear to me from the numbers that we've seen that this.
My understanding of the request is that it would be a second bus to increase the frequency of the availability of a service. So in other words, if you're on Great Road, instead of having to wait an hour for the bus to come back, the other one will be back sooner. So I think that's what the request is.
I think I had another one, hold on. Kind of more broadly, my understanding is that there's $2 million left to be allocated this round. So you've got.
Yes.
And you've got 10.5 million for us looking at here. Do you have a sense of which ones you think are most necessary? I think some of these are going to happen anyhow, is my belief, that it's either going to be ARPA funding or it'll end up in the budget somewhere.
So part of the work that I'm doing after today is preparing a recommendation for the board based on what I think we need, based on feedback I get tonight and feedback I've been getting from members of the staff. I'm still working on that. But, you know, I think that I've already mentioned a few things that I think we can wait on. The things that are in the capital plan, there are 11 items on here that are in the 10-year capital plan. So we're going to need to fund them. Well, I'm recommending that we fund them either way in the next 10 years, whether it's through this or through something else.
Now, the capital plan was again done before there were these significant increases in construction material costs, et cetera. When will you have an updated one of those, just so we have an idea? You're presumably going to have to spread things out over more time with interest rates going up and material costs going up. Not to throw another thing at you, but.
We're going to present, I'm going to present, and I'd love to do it in the joint forum like we did last year to the board and the select board and the finance committee. I believe I'm targeting the first week of December, which is whatever that Monday is. That would be when I'd like to present the capital plan. And we'll do our best to update estimates for escalation. We always include a contingency in most estimates that usually covers escalation. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on how long ago you put it together. So yes, we'll certainly work on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Vollinghoff.
Yeah, you know, just to follow up to that, in the 5.1 million, that was a little time ago that we all discussed this and the board made their decisions about those allocations. Is that 5.1 still like a firm number? Are the actual numbers that are coming through for a lot of the projects that were already approved, are they higher than that? Just on the same inflation type question.
Well, we're working within the allocation to complete the work. I mean, for example, the Great Road Water Study, the contract is for $100,000, and so that's what it's going to cost. It's actually $140,000 because we're funding another part of it from something else. The online permitting, we're bidding that right now. We expect that to come in under $150,000.
I'm thinking more just the capital projects
So we'll build to suit. I mean, if we have $500,000, we'll identify $500,000 with improvements and do as much as we can.
I see. Okay. You know, again, another follow on to Christine's question is just the prioritization of the list, because, and I'll hit on a point Jason had made, and I think several of us have mentioned the last time we'd met about this, is a lot of these, in my view, do appear to be more nice to haves versus more essential. And, you know, one of the ways I think we've thought about this list in the past when we mentioned it, or we discussed it, Jason mentioned health and safety, but also items that can affect the greatest number of people, you know, sort of stand out. I have a couple in my mind, but, you know, when I think about it from a finance committee perspective, it may not be the right approach to go item by item. I mean, it may be more just you know, if the select board is making a decision to have a philosophy or a list of 3 or 5 that we would view on our criteria are the highest priority that we think would have the most bang for the buck. That being said, another follow-on to your points is anything that wouldn't be approved here or recommended from us would naturally likely go to town meeting and require town meeting support to pass. And I'm sure that hasn't escaped anyone's attention that it may be easier to allocate money towards one area versus another with that sort of constraint. So that's my view as well, and I don't want to speak for Jason, but I do think, thinking about the broadest group of people and the more, health and safety sort of concerns, it would nicely encapsulate, I think, $2 million of $10 million, $10.5 million worth of request, rather than going line item by line item. It's just my sense.
Thank you. I'll echo a little bit of what you said because it's worth stating before we start a discussion and conclude with John that I recall last year we had a fairly eloquent statement that we had come up with as a FinCom for recommendation to the select board, so we should find that and revisit that if somebody didn't already bring it. So let's continue with the questions for John. Mr. Nin?
Sure, John. As far as R19, the extension to the Acton Housing Authority, is that dependent on R20? Do you have the capacity? I don't think you have the capacity now.
So thank you for the question. So we're planning and have the ability to accommodate the McManus Manor project in the existing treatment operations. We're nearing the end of our availability, but we have that one already accounted for. And just to further that, that's something that we've applied for a MassWorks grant. Mm-hmm. And we've had pretty good success with MassWorks grants. So there's a chance that we get that funded.
Okay.
So, just wanted to mention that.
So, no, my question was, do you need the filter better, the rapid infiltration expansion to accommodate the Acton Housing Authority building?
Not for this project, but for the next projects coming down the line, we will.
Okay, my other question is on R22, wastewater infrastructure to support the businesses on Great Road. If we go back to the West Acton sewer expansion project, businesses supported it, businesses wanted it until businesses found out what their betterments might be. Some of them still wanted it, and some of them were appalled at how much it was going to cost them. Before we get too far down this road, especially if you're talking about package plants, can we do a ballpark estimate of betterments? I know it's difficult because there's a lot of unknowns. You can put up package plants, but you still got to put the stuff somewhere in the end, which will be a problem down there. But I just, having lived through West Acton at least twice on my tenure in this committee and seen it be defeated in the end, basically on the same question, betterments. I just would encourage you to try and get to some estimate of betterment and go back to the businesses and say, would it be worth this to you? Because in the end, the first one failed on betterments and it was more residential, that some people weren't willing to pay the betterment because they had already put in a new septic system, and some people wanted it. And then a few years ago, it was more a question of, I remember the guy who was at Sal's Automotive that came before us and was looking at an $800,000 betterment, for an automobile repair shop. So in this case, our experience has been if we can somehow estimate that number, we've got a better chance of, I guess, defining the future success of the project before we go down a lot of work on it.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that, and I'm not interested in reliving any of those experiences. I was there for one of them, and I think that part of the work that we're doing right now, that we just had the kickoff meeting for this morning, is to identify the feasibility, and part of that is a financial analysis. So if we say, yeah, you could build 3 package plants to cover the whole district and it would cost X, or you could run a big pipe to South Acton and it would cost Y. If you take those 2 numbers and you put them into our betterment calculations, you can get a sense of what it would cost everybody. So that is part of the work that they're going to do for us, and we wouldn't proceed even with the next phase of design if that work resulted in something that we got a sense that wasn't going to go anywhere. And trust me, we're going to look at that and get that sense to avoid a lot of work before we get too far along.
Mr. Cole?
Just to follow up on R22, that same one that we were just talking about, that first level of, that first bite at the apple, that first sort of back of the napkin estimate of what the betterment would cost, it's going to cost $400,000 to get that level of detail before we can go to the owners along 2A and tell them what the betterments are going to be?
No, I think we'll get that with the study that we're doing right now, which was funded at 100. And then the 300 that follows that would be to carry forward to the next phase of design. So we'll get the answers with the 100 that we already have.
And will those answers be in before the next, or the second to next select board meeting where they'll be allocating the funding?
No, it's about a 6-month project, but they'll be in before the money is used. So if we decide not to use it, then we would not use it.
Very good. I have 2 others. On R19, also this is the sewer to the Kennedy property. How many other parcels would be impacted by this sewer expansion? If we had to run this to connect up, how many parcels are going to be subject to betterment?
So there would be no betterment. Unless we finance it through a betterment, there wouldn't be a betterment. What we're doing here is finance it through we're proposing to finance it through ARPA funds, which would not require a betterment.
Right, so this, I don't know where this current sewer line ends. Does it end literally 1 parcel away?
There is a house, a residential house, right next to Route 2 that would probably be able to connect if they wanted to.
By state law, aren't they obligated to? Or are they obligated to pay a betterment because it
No,
runs past the yard?
you only pay betterments if we issue betterments. In this case, we're not proposing to issue betterments, we're proposing to pay for it through a grant or through ARPA. So it wouldn't be a need to do a betterment because the money's already spent and collected.
Okay, that's good to know. And then on R29, the revenue replacements to deliver services. My understanding is that the spirit of ARPA was to backfill on expenses that were over and above or a result of the pandemic. I see that the first $600,000, that makes total sense. That was at the end of a couple of years of severe discombobulation of the way that we as a town delivered services. Is the next $400,000, is the next $100,000 that you're asking for, is that a direct result of COVID costs, or is this just shifting operating expense into one-time monies?
So the board allocated $400,000 for FY22 and 23. We've used $265,000 of that to backfill a few accounts that didn't get the revenue that we projected they would because of the pandemic. I think that we could probably use the remaining balance in lieu of appropriating another $100,000. This is in here as a placeholder because this funding can be spent out to, you have to have it figured out by 24, but you can spend it, I think, for another year or so after that.
Okay.
So it's really just a placeholder, and I don't expect to need it. So if you ask me my priorities, this wouldn't be a high one.
Okay, because I did look up last year's point of view because I do have it on my laptop, and I think what you were looking for, Mr. Chairman, was the recommendation, our ARPA recommendations from last year. Priority number 1, backfill all clearly identified COVID-related losses, and then our second priority was invest only in previously identified projects. Do not fund new initiatives that will have ongoing costs with one-time monies. So I think if we don't want to go through the list one by one, and I'm more than happy to do that because I'm used to finance committees that went until midnight. Items on here that have ongoing costs that I think are disqualified because they have ongoing costs. Not to take too much time here, but if the Senior Center Cafe is an ongoing cost, it's disqualified from ARPA.
Jason, can we hold this until we're finished with John and then talk about how we'll
Very good.
procedurally go through the list?
Very
Do you have
good.
any other questions for John?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Borden.
Thank you, John. DPW with the fuel depot, very important to where they design and where they're going to put that, because we don't want to end up building a new DPW building later on and find out, oh, we put the fuel depot in the wrong place, and now we have to move it again. From what I understand, the tanks that are in the ground right now are between 18 and 19 years old, somewhere in that range. They have a 20-year lifespan. So that's why I know Corey's monitoring that. I think that's very important for the town to proceed with that. Redoing the library, the parking and the roadway out here for the town hall and the library is very much needed. You can see the bottom of the library where a lot of the town vehicles are parked is falling apart, and it's just going to get worse this winter when you start plowing. I would like to see that all the town vehicles be parked down that section so that the things closer to the town hall and the library are used for that purpose by the residents that need to attend. So I'd like to see those things on there. I did another one. No, that wasn't it. Getting back to the sewer line going to McManus Manor, I wouldn't mind seeing that extend all the way to the public safety building, because eventually that could be something that could tie in and be beneficial to the town, instead of having to pump out a septic. And adding another bus on the last one, I just don't see it. I just don't see, how they're going to be, we're trying to be sustainable and make the world greener, and we're going to get another bus with diesel. Now, there's no buses out there that are electric right now for the town to run around in. I don't know if there's any hybrids, but it's either going to do it with natural gas or gasoline, because diesel is just the most pollutant that there is out there. So, something to consider. I just don't see the need for adding another bus right now where ridership is low since 2020. And the way corporate America is going, they're not going to be requiring their employees to be in the office every day. Example of that. So you're not going to need all the parking that we probably have right now down at commuter rail station. Not saying that it will never come back. At some point in the future, it very well could. But, things that we really need to consider and take a hard look at before spending money on something that not necessarily is going to be needed now or in the future for the next several years.
Okay, so I think I have a few questions, and you have another question? Go ahead.
John, in the SIP, the most recent SIP, there is an idea of switching the CAT vehicle to electric. Is that currently a possibility? It sounded like Roland said that those don't exist yet.
Yeah, so we actually replaced one of our utility vans from gas to electric, which it's just basically a box truck. It's not carrying anybody. The ones that carry people, we haven't been able to identify one that would work yet. They're definitely coming. There's school buses that are out there, but we're looking for the smaller passenger vans, and we're still trying to find something that would work. Ideally, we would actually replace our existing lease with those and not need to have a huge capital investment.
So these would be leases, is the idea?
Yeah, we currently lease a couple of them already.
Thank you.
No other questions there. John, thank you so much for presenting to us and providing the updated list. I think I have a couple of questions, perhaps. On the R20 expansion, my recollection when we were presented with that project in 2021 was that regarding specifically the discharge rate, we have in the capacity far more discharge than we need. So this isn't related to discharge, correct? It's just related to how fast they can process the wastewater? Is that correct?
You're talking about R20, the $1.3 million request? Is that what that question is?
Yeah, I believe so, and you had mentioned something about expansion in that.
Yeah, so in the 800, and maybe this could have been two different line items, but in the 800, so in the 1.3 is 800 to complete what we had wanted to do with the rehab project, you know, the pump stations and some of the other accessory
Right.
stuff. 500 of that is for increasing our discharge capacity. Meaning, right now, we have a treatment plant that we're permitted to treat 300,000, whatever the unit is. Yeah. And our septic fields can accept that much. Our plant, we could double the treatment capacity.
I think
septic fields, we can't double
I
without a bunch of permitting.
I just realized what my thinking was. My thinking was opposite, was that we have more capacity than we can discharge. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
More capacity
sorry.
to treat than we can create effluent and put it somewhere.
Got it. And so the $500,000 request on the expansion project also needs approval from whoever the governing agency is for the discharges, right? Or no, we create our own discharge, right? We're not discharging into a river or into a body of water or something
So
like
we've already started a study to do geotechnical work on the existing Adams Street site to see if we could put another rapid infiltration basin to increase our capacity, a portion more, basically to increase our capacity enough, a little bit more, basically, 50 to 100,000 gallons more.
that. I've got it now.
And $500,000 would be the cost of the design and the permitting to do that
Okay.
work. And then we'd need to finance it through the SRF or some other source to do the actual construction of that additional basin, which would be more than $1 million.
Great, thank you. My thinking was backwards about which one we had more of the capacity or the discharge rate, so thank you. R25, the parking lot, and I know there was also an item on here about setting up an outdoor meeting space, and I just want to ask if that can coincide with the demolition of the dilapidated building behind Town Hall. And are we going to seek a permit to demolish that building under the new rules of the Historic Commission or whomever it was that has deemed that to be a historic building, even though it may or may not be?
I'm not aware of any new rules. I think we're still operating under the same rules that said we couldn't demolish it before, but if there are new rules, I certainly would look at those. The outdoor meeting space is something that I think we need. People
Agreed.
are using it, you know, the proposal for 40,000 is next to the finance wing, which is over there on Woodbury Street. There's an area where there's a little bike rack where it could be a place where people would stop and meet, and when you're before a meeting, you could meet there and touch base on stuff or whatever. We meet with a lot of residents, and a lot of them like to meet outside when it's because of public health reasons and otherwise, and that would be a space to do that. Your question about the yellow home once occupied by Asa Parlin's family, as best I understand, the current plan is kind of on hold, but it was to stabilize that structure down to a smaller original size and then make an amenity around it where people can gather and meet and read poetry and do all the other things that you'd want to do in a space like that.
I know you're working very hard to come up with a viable plan for that building, and I know you take a lot of grief for it, so we appreciate you taking all of the hammer blows to the head on that. I think that concludes questions. Are there more questions for John? No? So John, thank you so much for bringing this evening.
Yeah, and thank you. And just getting back to the criteria that the Finance Committee talked about last year, things that are already in the capital plan and things that are related to health and safety, I can run through that if that's helpful to you, the 11 projects I mentioned that were in the capital plan already, or you may already identify them yourselves, but.
Does anybody think they have any questions or need further explanation on what might be specifically health and safety?
I think he's talking about two different things. I don't think the statement that it should purely be things in the SIP is sufficient, or that isn't not the entirety. I think things have come up that need to be dealt with, which are not in the SIP, and that there are probably things in the SIP on here that should not be, in my estimation, given the small number we're talking about, fall into the want not need category. I do have one question about that. With the accessibility improvements for NARA, are those required? improvements, or are those we would like to because it's the right thing to do?
Well, I think that they are, you know, the footbridge that goes over the pond, that it needs to be replaced. We are hoping to get an earmark for that, but those don't always work out. That's one thing. And then just basically the pathways around the new sports plaza need to be made better for accessibility reasons. So I think it's something that definitely I'm going to try to find a way to do, whether it's through ARPA or a grant or the budget. It needs to be done.
Anything further? Okay, John, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's first sort of establish a procedure and some ground rules about how we want to go through this and which items we want to address or not address, and so that we can come up with viable, I guess, insight and recommendations that we might like to give to the select board. And before we do that, Mr. Martin.
I was just wondering if I could make a quick comment.
Yes, please.
So last year you had the philosophy and you actually recommended and not recommended individual items. The latter is much more useful in our discussions in the select board, right? It's hard for us to evaluate your philosophy on the fly for each of 33 items. So, I mean, whether you choose your top 5 or whether you go through every one and say yes or no, that's much more helpful. And I would be happy to let the board know on each item what you decide.
Thank you very much. Okay, so procedurally, how would we like to go through this? Do we feel that the list is already in a bit of a priority and we should just go through it 1 through 33, or do you want to go dollar size?
I think we should go right down the list, and as David just pointed out, Selectman Martin, that we recommend or not recommend.
Great.
You know, and I think that way we kind of get a sense of where we're heading. If we want to have discussion on each one, we can do that as well.
Great, sounds good. Do you have something to say, Ms. Anderson?
I would also like us to whittle it down to the $2 million. I don't want us to walk out of here saying we recommend $4 million worth of changes because we've just sort of yes-noed down the list. I would like them to walk away with these are what we think the $2 million should be spent on.
Okay, any other comments? We might maybe make sense to go through it once, do a preliminary yes, no, get the no's off the list, and then come back and talk about the rest in detail. Does that make sense?
That would be probably the best way to do it. Is that
Okay.
where we could say, okay,
So we can just do a quick show of hands. R1 ABRSD, is that a yes or no?
It's a yes, but I'd like to lower the number.
Okay, well, that'll discuss later. So how many people are yes for ABRSD? So that's one, that's the majority. So that's whoever's keeping track, please put that on the yes list to discuss.
Again, to be clear, that's a discuss further.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
so,
Okay.
hang on.
The audit services.
I'll keep track as we go down.
Great, thank you. So just put a Y and an N. If it's an N, we'll just say, you know, it's a not recommend effectively.
I'd say no, they can find the money somewhere if they
On the
need to.
R2. Okay, so anybody who wants to keep on and discuss R2, raise your hand. Okay, cross it off. R3, the McManus Manor contribution. Anybody in recommendation of that? I think that maybe goes hand in hand down with the sewer project.
Yeah.
So those probably get discussed, or we flat out say we're not going to discuss one. So let's just leave that. Leave R3. Somebody draw a line down to the sewer project that it goes with.
Which is our what?
19.
R3 and R19 go together.
Yeah. Okay, R5, the water main construction at Kelly's Corner. Anybody in favor of keeping that and discussing it? Put your hand up. So we've got, it's like 2 out of 3, maybe 3 out of 3. So let's leave it on. Let's leave it on because she's going to have some detail. Okay, R3 is on the list. R6.
R3, R5,
Sorry,
wasn't it?
R3. So now we'll move to, sorry, R5, my bad. R6, design for Acton Water District for the PFAS mitigation. Who would like to leave that on the list for discussion? Raise your hand.
Okay, that's
That's
3.
3, 4, so that's on the list to discuss. R7, air quality for the public facilities.
Again, I think we can, they'll probably, I think it's on the capital list anyway, so I wouldn't call it a priority for your ARPA money right now, so no.
Not a priority. Okay, cross it off.
Which one?
7.
R7. R8, we can cross off.
Thank you.
R9, the NARA project, raise your hand if you want to leave that on and discuss that. I would. That's only 2, so cross that off.
You could leave that on there?
Cross it off, R9, cross it off.
I was in favor of discussing it, okay.
So that's
3.
like a 50-50.
So take it off then. That's what you want to do.
R10, the Senior Center Cafe. Anybody in favor of leaving that on to discuss? Do we want to leave that on to discuss to give any strong recommendations or strong opinions? It's just going to be a no recommendation.
We don't recommend it because it incurs ongoing costs.
Great. Okay, it's off the list. R11, the outdoor meeting space. On the list to discuss.
I think that can be phased with, if you're going to do the parking lot over, you can easily add that in, the whole project.
It's also one of those small dollar amounts that, as you add them up, they add up, but there's other bigger items here that are
Right, so
important.
I'd say right now.
Okay, let's cross it off. R15, the DPW feasibility design for the fuel depot. Anybody in favor for that? I know that's something that does, since we've been part of that conversation, we know how important that topic is. So let's go ahead and discuss. It looks like we've got 4 hands.
Because that just doesn't service, it services the police,
It also
the fire,
services the schools, yeah.
the DPW itself.
Right. The rental advocacy program, discuss, not discuss. It looks like no hands to discuss that. R17, the emergency rental assistance program. Yes, go ahead.
For the public record, I'd like to say that I'm not against a rental advocacy pilot program. I just don't think this is the correct way to fund it based on our previously stated criteria.
I think that's a nice comment. I echo that sentiment. And yeah, I think we don't want to send the wrong message by not wanting to discuss it. But again, it's a small item that I think we can find funding for other places that might be more suitable. Sorry. If you could turn those 2 microphones off. I know when she tried to speak, she couldn't. R17, the emergency rental assistance program. Discuss, not discuss. 1, discuss. You know what I would like to do, since John is still here, Mr. Mangiarotti, I apologize to hit you again, but could you just give us another quick synopsis of what the current status of the rental assistance program is and how it serves the community? Just a little bit more detail, because I'm not 100% clear on the history.
Yeah, I'm staying here because I'm happy to elaborate further on any of these items.
Thank you.
So if you remember the CARES Act, where we get $2 million right when the pandemic started, the recovery, a lot of the funding we used for that was for rental assistance, where if you're eligible based on, I think it's 60% of the area median income, you can apply to have basically a subsidy to help with your rent. And it's a program that we administered through our RHSO, which is our Regional Housing Services Office, and our Community Services Office. And we put a lot of funding into the community with CARES, and actually the board allocated 150, I believe, for FY22, but actually the state covered the program. We didn't disperse any funding because the state had the exact same program that they were running, and we just funneled all the people to that. So we actually have a balance left over that we would carry forward. But the idea would be that we would continue to provide assistance to people that are renting here in town to help with their monthly rent, and we would do it for as long as the money becomes available. I mean, it remains available.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, it was a program or an opportunity that came about only because initially of the state funding, the CARES funding. And so now that is running out, even though we have a little bit left. Once it runs out, we're looking for new ways to keep the program going. Is that correct?
So the CARES money we spent entirely, and the board actually set it as a goal last year to continue that program. And so it approved my recommendation to include it in the first round of ARPA funding. So we have ARPA funding on the books from last year, from the last approval, that we haven't used yet.
Okay.
So this request is for more. I think, as some of the things I'm working on will be recommending to the board that rather than funding this full allotment that's requested, rely on some of the money that's left over and reduce this for what we actually need next year.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Based on that, I would say that since this is also on the board, the select board's priority list, we should at very least discuss this.
I disagree. I say R16, R17, and R18 all fall into the exact same bucket. These are ongoing programs. This is one-time money. We should not be funding ongoing programs. If it's that important to the town, then it should be part of the operating budget and should not come out of one-time monies. So for the same reason that R16 was not of interest to us, that's the same reason, in my mind, R17 and R18 fall into the exact same bucket.
Okay, so show of hands to discuss R17. We've got 3. It's a 50-50 again. I'm not really sure what to do with the 50-50s. Why can't we have an odd man here? Let's leave it on to discuss. We had another 50-50 that we said not to discuss. Which one was it? Let's go back and put it back on the list to be fair. I think Nara Park, R9, was the one that we had a 50-50. Can I get a show of hands to discuss the Nara Park accessibility improvements? That's the 50-50. Put it back on the list to be fair. So if it's 50-50, we'll be discussing it.
Mr. Chair, this is too much discussion on whether to discuss a topic.
Thank you, Mr. Willinghoff. I believe we are on to...
R17 is not.
No, it is. We said it is.
Oh, okay.
Okay, R18, child care subsidy programs. Okay.
If we're going to be discussing R17, I don't know why we wouldn't discuss.
They are all in the same bucket, more or less.
Yeah. I mean, I think Jason brought up a philosophical question about it, which we can discuss right now, or just a broader philosophy on it, or we can wait and discuss the individual items.
Let's put them together. R16, 17, and 18, we'll discuss them. R19, sewer main extension. Raise your hand if we will be discussing that. Another 50-50. We're going to be discussing everything. So that we'll be discussing that. R20.
I'm sorry, discussing is a preliminary yes, no
Correct.
vote. So we're saying we're 50-50 yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the assumption there is that someone will sway somebody else. And the South Acton wastewater treatment, 1.3 million, will we be discussing that? Yes. Yes, okay. And the Hayward Road intersection traffic signal, will we be discussing that? I am the only one, so no, we will not be discussing that. R22, the initial design for the wastewater infrastructure support for Great Road, will we be discussing that? No show of hands for that, okay.
Can we make that an explicit not recommend?
Yeah.
Okay, R24, because R23 has already been crossed off. R24 is the Complete Streets Plan to improve the pedestrian, bicycle, and motorist. Show of hands? No, okay. R25, the library and town hall parking lot reconstruction. Show of hands? Okay, we won't be discussing that. R27, the NAGOG improvements for the NAGOG treatment wastewater system. Show of hands? Yeah, he has to abstain. So that we will be discussing because there's 3 out of 5. R26, revenue replacement, which was already, what did I, oh, R29, which was revenue, am I on the right topic? Has already been self-proclaimed as it's just a placeholder for the future, so we won't be discussing that. R30 Sustainability Initiatives and towards zero carbon, so raise your hand. No? Okay. R31, programs for residents, businesses to implement energy efficiency. Raise your hand. We'll be discussing that. No. And R33, the transportation for the additional CAT. That will be a no. So,
Motion to not recommend anything that did not get at least 3 votes.
did you just make a motion?
I did.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second. We have a motion to not recommend anything that did not make an initial vote, and a second. Discussion.
Roland, could you please read the list?
Sure. R1. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you
That's
for the
good timing.
introduction.
That was the alarm. Take the vote. Read the
R1
list.
is a Y. R2 is a no. R3, we,
I'm sorry, could you just read the no's?
of those, R2, R7, 8, R10, R11, R21, 22, 24, 25, 29, 30, 31, and 33.
Should we add those up and see how much that reduces the list by? Because if it reduces it to more, it's not enough, is it? Okay, that answers that. More discussion on those topics?
Do we need to read what the investment is?
We can discuss the motion.
Well, I guess read down the.
Seconded, not recommend anything that you get the votes.
Okay, so all those in favor of not recommending those items which did not go for discussion, you can discuss
I would
now.
like to discuss.
Okay,
For me, I'm comfortable with all of those saying that they do not meet the criteria of necessary right now and are not reasonable to be funded in a different way in our current structure.
okay, thank you. Mr. Cole?
From a pure, I don't want this to sound callous. I'm not saying that all these things that you said no to are not necessarily worthy programs. We just don't feel that ARPA is the right funding mechanism for them. As what was said earlier, I do want to reiterate that. I don't want it to sound like all these programs the Finance Committee has said are terrible ideas and should never be funded, with the exception of the Ace of Parlin House. Anything else on the list is, it may or may not be live. It's just not live from an ARPA perspective.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor of not recommending those items say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so those items we will let the Select Board know we do not recommend. So now let's start at the top of the list with the yeses and discuss and vote on those individually, please. So I believe the first one is the ABRSD, who has come in with no additional request, just asking to...
No, that's additional 500,000.
No, that was part of their original $2 million request from last year.
But if it got shot down last year, it still qualifies as a new request this year.
And did it actually get shot down?
It didn't get funded. It didn't get funded, so
It just
it's
got
not
put off.
plan of record. So there's 5.1 million, 5 point whatever million in plan of record, and then there isn't. So just because they asked for it originally, somebody could have come in and asked for $10 million for PFAS. Doesn't mean it was plan of record ever. So just pay attention. My advice is we just pay attention to the additional request for 23-24 because everything else in the past is dead. If it didn't get funded, it's not funded. Just because it was asked for doesn't mean it's guaranteed in any way, shape, or form, in my humble opinion. So on topic number one, I would like to say I am speaking to what I said earlier from a safety and health and safety perspective. There's absolutely no reason why this 911 program isn't done yet. If they need money to get it across the line, it needs to be funded. If we run out of money at the end of this, I hate to say it because of my own family history with this. If we don't have if we are not able to get all $500,000, then some of the mental health allocation may have to come out. But 911, I mean, look at what just happened in the last 2 weeks within our school district. That has to happen, and frankly, I'm chagrined that 7 years after I was working on that, it's not finished yet. So by all means, they need some money.
So are you recommending all or some portion?
I'm recommending a portion. I don't necessarily want to give them the $500,000 necessarily. Let's see what else we could off the list. But I think he said he needed, I believe he said 350 for the E911. 150 for the E911. That should be a absolute recommended it should be expedited and get out the door. The rest of it, we can argue about.
What about
for
the
rest.
$200,000 in revenue replacement?
150.
Oh, I thought it was 200 to ComEd.
What were the three items that he said? What were the numbers?
It was 150 for the phone, 150 for the psych services, and 200 for ComEd, I thought.
150 for ComEd and 50 for the in-home mental health.
Oh, I missed the 50 for the in-home. Sorry.
So 150 for the phone, what was the other thing?
Thank you for clarifying.
So on this one, I would say give the select board the advice that if it's clear health and safety, go with it.
Other comments, suggestions, recommendations, sway people's opinions? Going once, going twice. I would say that the 150 ComEd qualifies in the revenue replacement, and especially in light of the fact that the E&D is currently below 3%. And I would also support the 150 for the 911 compliance issue. And I'm torn on the 150 for the psych services because we're not unanimously in support of other services that are similar for the town side, which are, maybe more or less important. Comments?
Recognizing that mental health is hugely important, I would really hope the school would find some way to pay for it, but it does not fit into our one-time expense. I would love to spend this money on this, but I think this has to become something that becomes part of the school's budget.
Okay. Any differing opinions, other comments?
Move to recommend $300,000 to the ABRSD.
Can we wait? I'm sorry, can we wait till we have a full list?
Haven't gotten a second yet, so I guess we can.
So, Christy, what you're asking is that maybe we come up with a number for each item, wait till we've completed the list, and then vote them as a blanket?
Well, and then potentially whittle them down.
Okay. So right now we've got R1 on for 300,000, is that correct?
It's TBD.
Okay. Next item, Roland?
Well, we didn't do anything with R3.
Because it's related to R19, so let's discuss those now. I was very interested by the comments that Mr. Mangiarotti made about, being leaned on a little bit by the state. Are we contributing to this project or are we not? It seems interesting and somewhat silly that there's a purchase and sale agreement with $1 million going one way and $1 million sort of donation going another way. I think an actual investment in some sort of infrastructure that's useful is a much more meaningful and tangible investment in infrastructure and community. Are there other opinions on that topic? Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
If you take R3 and R19 together, you use up the $2 million.
Right, and what I would say is R3 is a cross-off and some portion of R19 is a better investment, given the fact that that then can be connected to the public facilities, public works, sorry, not public works, public safety.
So you mean the other way
facility.
around? R3 is a cross-off and R19.
That's what I meant. If I
That's
said
not
the
what you said.
opposite, did I say the opposite? Okay. Yes. R3 would be the
I also do not recommend R3 at all. If the state is looking for local contribution, I would look to the $1.6 million that we bought the land on and then let sit fallow for 7 years. So yeah,
I agree.
I would say we do not recommend R3, and then R19, same topic as R1. I'd be willing to kick some money to it if we've only got $2 million to spend. Then we can argue over what portion we want to give to it.
Do you want to argue over that portion right now? Mr. Billinghoff?
I would just say some of these bigger dollar items are, I think, material enough that they should be brought to town meeting. And that's my view on some of this is, I agree with what most of the committee has said, but, you know, that McManus Mansion, sewer extensions and items like this, it does fit nicely into some of this funding, but they could be big dollar items, and it should probably, you know, get greater scrutiny than at a town level is just one additional way to think about it.
Motion to not recommend R3.
Do I hear a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion on the table not to recommend R3 and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor, sorry, we're waiting. I've been in your shoes 2 years running. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion on R19, or would we like to hold that?
Let's hold it.
Okay, holding R19. Mr. Rowland, what's next?
R5, excuse me, R5, Acton Water District Water Main Construction at Kelly's Corner for 1.3.
Okay, so this sounds like is probably going to backfill some of the rise in inflation in construction costs. Does that seem like a fair statement, Ms. Anderson?
The Water District had, knew this project was coming. They are actually saving a lot of money by doing it while Kelly's Corner is pulled up there, saving the ratepayers a lot of money. The original estimate was 1.7 million. They've put aside 1.1, and the extra money asked for is to try to bridge the gap at the 2.4 million that finally came back as the estimate now that we're staring down actually doing this.
Has it actually been contracted, or is it still up in the air as to what it might cost?
I don't know.
I think you look at it one way or the other is if you're using Acton water, if you're not in a well or getting your water from the town of Concord on 2A, you're paying the Acton Water District. So it's either we fund it here or we fund it through our water rates. That's basically what it's going to boil down to.
Yeah, you're saying it's getting funded someplace. The question is, do we want to fund it with the ARPA funds?
Right, correct.
Yep, okay. Mr. Noon, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think R5 is part of the normal business of being in the water district's business. If I was going to fund anything on this list for the water district, it would be R6.
Okay.
Which is an abnormal cost
Yeah.
that they're seeing. So in my sense, if you get ARPA money should be used not only for more one-time things, but not the abnormal as opposed to the normal.
Okay. Ms. Anderson?
I would argue that this is abnormal because they have no choice about when this project happens. This isn't we'd like to replace the water mains, but we're going to wait a few years until we've got the money saved up or better rates or material costs. They are tied into doing this now at these increased rates because of the project.
Mr. Noon?
But as you said, they're probably saving money in the long run because it's all going to be torn up anyway.
Roland, did you have another comment or further? No. Does anybody need any clarification from the town manager while we're on the subject? No.
So I move that we not recommend R5 water main construction in Kelly's Corner.
Sorry, what was that? Mr. Willinghoff?
I'll second.
Microphone.
I mean, it's a $1.3 million. Either we choose this and nothing else, or we don't choose this.
Or we do something.
So for the record,
I second
Okay.
the not
Thank you.
recommendation on R5.
just to make sure that the audience can hear it when they watch the
This
video.
isn't formal. We're just sending a list to the board.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so we have a motion to not recommend R5 and a second. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay. We're not recommending R5.
Motion to recommend R6.
Second.
Okay. For what amount?
550.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend R6 for $550,000 for the PFAS mitigation. And we have a second. Any discussion?
Since we're at
Mr. Roll.
tight budget, I would be willing to cut that. Take off 50 or 100,000, 500 or 450,000. Just because we don't have a lot of money, we're going to run out of funds, and, we have 2 million, and that's going to take up over half at 550.
Very good point. Ms. Anderson?
I agree with Roland. I think it's early in the list, if nothing else, or in the process to assign specific numbers to items in this discussion.
Okay. So right now we have a motion on the table to recommend 550 and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? So was that a 50-50 vote?
There's a 50-50 vote, so now what happens?
We'll just discuss it when we discuss the other sort
we
of
get to-
tabled items
When we
at
get to the
end,
final
right?
number, when we're
Yes.
trying to get to that final.
So
2
Roland,
million
if you will
number.
please table that till the end.
Point of order,
Oh, sorry.
50-50. If it doesn't get a majority, it fails.
Oh, thank
So-
you. So, yes,
So the motion does not carry.
right.
There's
So
no
now
tie- There's no ties.
we can
It's like baseball.
We could discuss another motion, or we can wait till the end and see what number we'd like to attach to it, which would be my recommendation, and I think it's probably prudent.
R7, so, okay,
R6 is dead, is currently no
sorry,
recommendation.
no,
at this time.
okay.
Not,
Yeah.
it's a no recommendation, it's not a not recommended.
Okay, so Roland, R7 is next, is that right?
Correct, R7 would be projects that will address air quality in public facilities by improving HVAC systems for $500,000. Oh, I'm sorry. R9 is the next one on our list,
Thank you.
and that is narrow accessibility improvements.
Okay. So this was one that we were split when we raised our hands. I know a lot of improvements have been made at NARA. The buildings have been completed, the bathrooms have been installed. There's now classrooms up there, which have been, I think, a tremendous help to the camps and so forth. So my understanding is this completes some of the grounds around that. Is that correct? Does anybody else?
But it does also fall under recreation, which they go to CPA funding for $200,000.
Yeah.
Instead of going for ARPA funding, where I think we could use ARPA funding for more benefit to the town.
And the town,
And you can go take it out of the CPA funding, you have, you have to compete for the project, but I think that'd be a better use of the money.
Okay, Mr. Cole?
and the town manager who has proven his prowess at being able to find grants elsewhere, which is something I'm very proud of his abilities. Thankfully, they're there. He tipped his hand and said that there was the possibility of a grant elsewhere. So let's say, find that money elsewhere. Motion to not recommend.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to not recommend and a second on R9, the NARA accessibility improvements. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so we won't be recommending that. Roland, what was the next item?
R15, TPW building design and permitting for the fuel depot for town and schools.
Okay. Discussion about this. Roland and I have probably more information than the rest of you because we've attended a lot of the DPW meetings. We do know that they've prioritized various portions of that project, and the fuel depot is basically number one on the priority list, isn't it?
Right now, after the last meeting from last week,
And it does affect a lot of stakeholders in town, and I think you probably can't get a lot of the rest of that project or any other work done there without taking care of this.
Correct.
Do we want to fund it out of ARPA? Mr. Cole?
I have a question about this. Would approving this be seen as a tacit approval to do any other component of the larger project?
I think not, based on the conversations that, I believe what the DPW committee is recommending is to split out the fuel depot and this perimeter safety issue as their own topic to be brought to town meeting or to the select board earlier, and then the larger project to be discussed after, is my understanding.
Does this $250,000 complete the project, or is it merely a down payment on this fuel depot project?
Roland might be able to answer differently, but
Or the
my
town
understanding was that this was
defer
really
the-
about study, right?
We have the expert here.
I
Yeah.
defer to the town manager on that because I don't
Yeah.
know the answer.
My understanding was that this was to study and design how to move the fuel depot. Go ahead, Mr. Mangiarotti.
The actual construction of the fuel depot will be, I would say, in the range of $1 million. This is to actually to complete the design and permitting to allow for that project to proceed, you know, because it's going to be a multi-year process to get that funded. This will expedite that.
Thank you for that information. This is why I'm torn on this. If this was a one and done, I'd say this is a safety thing, we should be done with it. But what I don't like about it is that approving this has us on the hook for future expenses. Now, the counter argument to that, countering my own argument here, is that it has to happen anyway, right? If indeed these tanks are at risk of hitting end of life and causing a wider economic catastrophe or a Superfund site or whatever the hell happens when these things fail, if this has to happen anyway, then I'm okay with this coming out of ARPA funds. But if this is going to be sort of a tacit approval for the next $5 to $10 million of work over there, I'm not interested.
Other opinions? Roland?
Okay, so from my understanding is that it's going to need to be done either way. Jason is correct. And if we don't do anything, and one of those tank structures is underground now, we are going to have, you're going to have a Superfund site. It's going to cost you a heck of a lot more money than $250,000. It's going to cost you a lot more than $1 million too, I can tell you that. So this design would be to where we're going to locate it so that we can proceed forward in the future of building a new DPW building. Because it is used by the police, the fire, the schools, the DPW itself for all the trucks for plowing our roads and everything else, and it's used all the time, right? And the new design would be to move the tanks above ground. They'd be self-contained, they're double-walled. But there is design that has to go into that to figure out where to put it, what's going to be the best for the community, and also give us a safety upgrade that we don't have now. You know, it'll be better monitored, things like that. And
Okay.
I think this is something that we should absolutely fund.
Motion
Motion.
to approve this with the proviso that we might have to come back and shave money off of it if we run past our $2 million line.
So we have a motion and a second. More discussion? Ms. Anderson?
Mr. Mangiarotti, you said that this would allow us to expedite the process, I believe. Does that put us in a helpful timeframe relative to potential problems with the situation, rather than having this be part of the larger redesign process?
Yes, it creates the flexibility that we'll need to execute the replacement of the fuel depot, which we've identified as a need regardless of what happens with the Public Works building.
More comments or discussion? Let's reiterate the motion. Jason, if you could shorten it, please.
Motion to approve with the proviso that we may have to lessen the amounts if we need to shoehorn it into a $2 million final number.
So I know we already have a motion and a second. Before the second happened, my recommendation would have been to qualify your statement by saying, why don't we just then table it till the end? But because we have a motion and a second, we need to vote. So, all those in favor of approving R15, currently at $250,000, with the proviso that we may need to adjust it, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. And the motion fails. So let's discuss it at the end as we will recommend it, but we need to discuss the dollar amount so that we can make a succinct recommendation. Okay, what's next on the list, Mr. Borden?
R16, rental advocacy pilot program.
And I think we said we would like to pool R16, 17, and 18 together. We don't necessarily have to, but certainly it seems like a discussion point to have together. They're all, I think, noteworthy public service programs. Who would like to start the discussion?
Well, procedurally, I'd like to say that I'd like to wait for these until we get through a couple of the other big ones to see what we have left. Because I would put the $150,000 worth of mental health stuff in the schools in the same category as these.
I think that's an excellent recommendation. Ms. Anderson?
Philosophically, I think that 17 and 18, the rental assistance and the subsidy, childcare subsidy, should be discussed as potentially going into the budget. That said, Mr. Mentorati's idea of these being programs that ran as long as we had funding for them, I think makes them actually a good items for being in this category. That said, I'd like the town to discuss potentially at a town meeting or even at the select board whether we should always run some sort of programs like this, or if these are simply a response to the extraordinary times that we have had.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little harsh to have a wonderful program because we can afford it and then suddenly yank the rug out from underneath people who may need these programs. But then the question comes, where is the money going to come from? So I like Mr. Noon's suggestion. Let's discuss this at the end if we have money left over. Does that fly with everybody else? Okay, let's move on. What's next, Mr. Borden?
So we're lumping 16, 17, 18. So R19 would be sewer main extension, Acton Housing Authority site at 364 Main Street for 1.5 mil.
And we had said earlier that we voted against R3, right? So that separated R3 and R19. And my short-term memory just failed. I don't remember where we left R19 at that point.
Motion to not recommend R19.
There we
Second.
go. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Noon?
Mr. Wellinghoff, would you like to talk to your motion, or I can?
Well, yeah, among other things, the dollar amount is relatively large. I think this is something that's, some of these larger ones should go to town meeting. I'm not completely, fully clear on McManus. I know some of the background on the land purchase and the housing authority there, but just given the dollar amount, I think it's something that the town should talk about.
Now I remember where we left R19. More discussion?
My feeling is it's a lot of money to benefit relatively few people in town. So you seconded, right? So it doesn't need to be.
Okay. Mr. Wellinghoff? Excellent. All those in favor of the motion to not recommend R19, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Christy, I apologize. You are very busy, and so are you, Mr. Borden, and I do appreciate your help with the note-taking. Mr. Borden, what is next on our list?
Again, another large ticket item, South Acton Wastewater Treatment System. And I believe that was the rapid infiltration basin.
That was $500,000, and the $800,000 was for the existing, pump and treatment facility upgrade and maintenance.
Oh, I could see us, taking out the 300 or whatever it was, the 800. I don't know.
I feel this might be an item we wait till the end and see how much money is left from other things that we, is that about what you were about to say, Mr. Noon?
We're getting close to the end, Mr. Chairman. I'm of two minds on this one. I support the money for the filter bed or rapid infiltration basins. I'm a little less supportive of the, amounts to inflation on the, whatever, $5 million we approved not so long ago at town meeting. So expansion of the rapid infiltration beds is definitely something we should be thinking about for the long term. Pump replacement, pump station replacement is more like ongoing maintenance of a sewer system. So I'd probably be willing to support half the number.
Half the number or the 500,000 for the expansion?
I guess if it's 500,000, then fine, 500,000.
Mr. Cole? Mr. Wellinghoff?
Yeah, just more food for thought on the R6 and the PFAS, but, you know, if we are considering the amount of people that could be impacted by these, you know, the wastewater treatment system would be a smaller subset than the water system in aggregate and PFAS. So I would think, you know, we would, in my view, I would support the 550 for PFAS and take away from a wastewater treatment system if that was a trade-off to make in my mind.
Thank you. That's an excellent recommendation. I feel like somewhere in one of the discussions, either among our committee or perhaps it was at a select board meeting or during one of the wastewater or the water board's meetings, wasn't there discussion about at some point, either currently or in the future, needing to treat some of the PFAS-laden water by literally just dumping it into the waste system? Mr. Martin, is that a topic that rings a bell? That they may need to take water that they've literally just pumped out of the ground and send it straight back into the wastewater treatment system to get rid of it? Is that something I remember hearing correctly?
So the PFAS issue is hugely complicated. So as far as wastewater goes, our treatment plant removes a little bit of PFAS, but the people who live in the district add PFAS. The water coming into the treatment plant has more PFAS in it than the water that they came out of their taps, so they add PFAS. Because there's PFAS in shampoos, nonstick cookware, dental floss, takeout food containers, and so when they wash those things, it comes down the drain. And our treatment plant removes a little bit of it because the PFAS tends to concentrate in the sludge, and we burn the sludge, which destroys the PFAS. On the PFAS on the water side, there's going to be new federal requirements, which are about 5 times stricter than the state requirements.
Mr. Martin, thank you very much for that. So I like Mr. Wellinghoff's suggestion, which is that we maybe, Roland, tie that together with the PFAS and discuss that at the end when we know how much money we have. Okay. Was that the correct recommendation, Mr. Wellinghoff?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, we could table those to the end, but it was really to recommend PFAS over the wastewater treatment system, but happy to have that discussion together.
I agree with that.
Great. So we'll hold that for now.
So the last one that we have on our Y list is number 27, which is NAGOG improvements to the NAGOG wastewater treatment system for $150,000. So.
Okay. And on this, we'll take comments from everybody except for Mr. Noon.
I stand ready to answer questions, but I will recuse myself.
No.
I've listened to the presentation from the spokesperson for this request at the most recent public forum with the select board. I think what strikes me as being plausible with this request is the fact that that specific wastewater treatment plant is currently processing a lot of rainwater. And my understanding is that the bulk of the money that they're asking for would literally go to upgrade their system such that they're no longer processing rainwater, which is really just a waste of money, a waste of energy. Talk about carbon footprint and all those sorts of things. To me, that makes sense on that level. Anybody else have discussion or opinion on the topic?
I unfortunately am of two minds on this. On the one hand, the fact that what sways me about this is that they are not eligible in any other place, that they can't turn around and get money from any other entity, and they're not eligible to apply for ARPA directly. So that sways me in their favor. What sways me against them is the concept of the number of people percentage of the town that it impacts and that it helps. So I am deadlocked on this one. The fact that we were at 3 on the vote does not surprise me. I think this is, what I like about this more than any of the other entities is that this is a shovel-ready project. They've already got their design, they just need to move forward. I also like the fact that this is more or less a repair or a fix-up of an existing thing, and not any kind of new, that they're not going to be getting a ton of new capacity. It's more or less just a fixed thing. But where I can't get where I having a hard time getting across the finish line is that this is a relatively small section of the town versus what Mr. Wellinghoff said about PFAS is for 98% of the residents of town are fed by the PFAS side. So,
Ms. Anderson.
I'm still sort of shocked that this is a private entity and not something that the town does, given that they would have to borrow as a business loan at the current high rates, especially. I am very inclined to support this for the number of reasons Jason stated, also about it being immediate. I would love to see this become part of the town and not have it part of our town's infrastructure be dependent on a private organization to maintain.
Other comments? I would be happy to do one of two things. Entertain the motion on this now, or save it till the very last after we've now revisited some of the other items to see how much money is left. I don't care which you guys decide to do. I would think either of those would be a good avenue.
I'll make a motion.
If you would like to,
Okay,
please.
so I motion that we approve the 150, or recommend, I should say, for NAGOG improvements to the NAGOG treatment wastewater, the tongue twister, treatment system. You know, if they're going to be getting rid of rainwater out of there, it's going to make it more efficient. It's an upgrade to the facility. It's an upgrade to take care, and it helps address, it's still addressing our citizens, right? It's not addressing the bulk of it, but I still feel that it's a worthwhile project, so I recommend.
I would add to that it has other intrinsic benefits such as carbon emissions, which is on the list that we've already sent out. There's other ways with economic development that it helps, where we've already maybe or are about to cut out some of the economic development initiatives that are in here. So to me, it's like a triple win and maybe a single negative, right? Mr. Noon, do you have a comment?
The only comment is just to make sure that the committee members understand the scope of this. This treatment plant is 50 years old, and it covers all of the NAGOG office park, including Insulet Corporation, all of the retail part of NAGOG mall, so at the moment 5 restaurants. All of the condominiums in NAGOG Village, in West Wind, and all the streets down as far as where like Junior's Pizza is. It's not an insignificant part of the town.
Does that include Sachem Way?
Yes, and
So
the
that's
Acton Housing Authority.
Acton Housing
Sachem
Authority,
Way.
so.
And it is permitted at 200,000 gallons per day, so it's 2/3 the size of the town facility in terms of permit.
I think that is good information and sheds light on the magnitude and importance of the request. So we have a motion on the table from Mr. Borden to recommend the additional 150,000.
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay.
Mr. Noon, would you like to officially abstain?
Because I said that 3 times already.
Let the record show that Mr. Noon did abstain from the vote after having publicly recused himself. Okay.
So where
So
are we
now we
at?
can revisit how much money's left.
Mr. Chairman, where would you like to start? Would you like to start at R1 and go down?
No, what have we approved?
Yeah, we should put the dollar amounts on what we've already approved and see how much money is left. Mr. Martin is stepping up because I think he's been working it on a spreadsheet for us.
Yeah, I made a spreadsheet. So far, you've just, if I'm correct, you positively voted $300,000 for the school and $150,000 for the NAGOG treatment plant, leaving you $1.5 million.
I believe we did not vote on the school.
We did not.
We discussed it.
We discussed, we didn't vote on that.
So did we only approve one item so far? We left everything else?
Well, the question is, 16, 17, 18, did we do anything with that?
No, we have not approved them yet.
We have not approved those yet.
Okay, so,
Can I come at it from a different angle?
Sure.
We have rejected 3, 5, 19,
Oh, we did 7 and 8. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, we all rejected all those.
I mean, we made motions to reject.
Mhm.
I'm going to have to
Oh,
go back
okay,
and
I
watch
see
the
what you're saying.
tape on this.
It gets complicated when we have this many motions.
Do you want me to go down the list of what we have that we still have left to do? Okay,
Yep.
R1, which is the ABRSD. R1. R6. R15. 16, 17, 18, 20, and then we just approved 27, which was 150,000.
And then is that it after 20?
27.
We just approved 27.
Yep, so we have one.
Okay, good. Our list is getting fairly short. I think the money is still long, but the list is short.
I would like to discuss removing the rental advocacy pilot program from our list, to whittle it down a little further, and the one-time money for a potential ongoing expense argument.
I think that's a fair argument. Anybody else like to discuss that? And would anybody like to make a motion? Or did you actually make a motion? I didn't think so. Okay. I'm not hearing more discussion. I'm not hearing a motion.
Motion to not recommend R16, the rental advocacy pilot program.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to not recommend R16 pilot program for rental advocacy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. I'm going to wait for Mr. Borden to catch up.
So why don't we discuss 17 and 18 now, get those out of the way, since those are also small item numbers.
I think the sentiment initially was to kind of hold those till the very last to see if there was money left over.
Well, that's what we're doing, we're holding everything to the last, and now we're not gonna have anything.
But no, we've got big items on here that I think are clearly within the purview of what we've decided should be discussed, which is, needs, revenue replacement, health and safety. So I would say let's start back at the top of the list. And let's go R1, ABRSD.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I recommend that we allocate $300,000 to ABRSD to aforementioned items.
And that's what we had discussed previously. Would anybody else like to discuss that or make a motion? Mr. Cole, sorry. Microphones?
Would the committee entertain waiting just 2 minutes for me to put the Excel sheet together so that I can tell you exactly where we are?
It's not even a motion yet.
I've
Yes,
done-
we
I've
will
done
wait
that if
until
you
you can
want.
put a spreadsheet together. In fact, Jason, while you do that, is it possible for us to take a recess for 5 minutes? We will take a recess for 5 minutes and reconvene here at 5 minutes to 9 o'clock.
That's 10 minutes.
Not on that clock.
That's 9:45.
Oh, that clock.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we don't take a recess. Let's just plow through this and go home.
Well, we're waiting for Jason to make the list so that we can look at this with
Don't rush, Mr. Cole.
the very specific numbers that we need to know. So I will amend the recess.
Mr. Chair, I do have that spreadsheet, so I can give you the number updated anytime you want.
Please do that.
Thank you.
So assuming with or without the $300,000?
Correct, without.
Without, there's $1.8 million left.
Does
Okay.
that include R17 and R18?
The only things I've heard you say is, correct me if I'm wrong, is R27.
Okay. At this time, sorry.
Right.
Sorry, sir. At this time, we have not said no to 2.84 million. At this time, we have said yes to only 150,000. So that leaves us with, what he just said, 1.85. So say we say yes to 17, just gaming it out, say we say yes to 17 and 18. We'll just slide out the formula here. We still have quite a bit to go, so we're in pretty good shape considering how much we said no to. So there's only, if we say yes to 17 and 18, we only have 4 variables that we have to decide. R1, R6, R15, and R17. Sorry, R20. So that's not bad. Only 4 variables left. Just for making, go ahead.
Why are we prioritizing R17 and R18 above our
I'm-
potential
I'm not-
allocations
I'm
for
not-
those others?
I'm not prioritizing above. I'm just letting us know where we're at to try and figure out if we're close. I mean, because they're the smallest numbers, that's why. That's why I threw them in.
I'm going to ask that we save those until the end.
Okay, we'll pull that out.
Okay, so now that we have the spreadsheet rolling.
Yep.
I would like to revisit what Mr. Wellinghoff said, and let's go back to R1, ABRSD, and I will accept a motion.
Motion to allocate 300,000 to ABRSD per R1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? And Jason, if you could turn your microphone off, please, and Mr. Wellinghoff. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
Motion to recommend R6 PFAS 550.
Second.
Discussion? All,
Again, as noted before, this affects a significant portion of the town comparable to many of these other projects, which are much smaller parts of the town population.
and I agree with Mr. Wellinghoff.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Say it again, please. Which one? What did you just say?
R6, the PFAS mitigation measures, $550,000. Motion to recommend and seconded. Mr. Noon seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 We did. Would you like to make a comment? You have not voted yet.
I don't know how I'm going to vote on this because don't understand where we stand with other numbers. Could you, Jason, please clarify what items we have outstanding?
So we have just recommended 300,000 for R1. We have R6 outstanding at 550, well, or whatever. We have R6 outstanding, R15, R17, R18, and R20.
And we've already put aside 150 for R27.
Yeah, yes. So at this point, believe it or not, if we do everything, that's recommended, no, I screwed that up. Okay. We are currently, if everything that we've not said yes to guaranteed at this point, we're oversubscribed by 600,000 and change. So we've got to shave 600,000 change off of the remaining if we want to get to the round $2 million number.
How much are you counting on R20?
R20, I'm not counting anything at this time for R20.
That number includes,
So I'm counting, yes, I'm counting 660,000 for R20 right now.
motion to recommend 700,000 for South Acton
Will you read a
wastewater
motion?
treatment.
Wait.
Microphone's off. Sorry, we're still in the middle of a vote. We're still in the
Nay.
vote because our secretary was making notes and has not had a chance to vote yet, and she just voted nay. All those,
What's the motion?
this was the motion to approve 550,000 for PFAS,
Which carried?
Yes.
which carried, well, we're not done yet. Any abstentions? Now it carried. Okay.
So, Dave,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend 700,000 to the South Acton Wastewater Treatment Center per R20.
second.
Nope.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Anderson.
Why 700,000 rather than, as Steve pointed out, the 500,000 that would increase the discharge capacity and is not otherwise part of the general operating expenses?
Mr. Wellinghoff, your answer. 700,000 very tidily gets us to 2 million exactly.
No, you're off by 40,000.
I meant 660,000. Just kidding.
I'm okay with that.
Mr. Borden.
We have a motion?
We have a motion to recommend the wastewater treatment for 700,000, and we have a second.
I would be inclined to give that extra money back up to the PFAS on the argument that it helps out more people.
PFAS has currently been fully funded.
Okay, then,
I would say, so can we,
I thought we were over.
we're not currently over at this point. At this point, the only three things that we have said yes to are R1, R6, and R27.
Which is $1 million.
Which is exactly $1 million. So we have $1 million left.
Your point might be that they initially requested 2 million and this 550 would get them to 1 million. Because I do recall their earlier request was for a larger amount of money.
While I recognize the beauty of making that 700,000, I'm inclined to at least examine spending that money in other places. I really need a whiteboard to see where this all falls.
I should be able to share.
I
shouldn't
empathize with you.
I should be able to share, right?
It's extremely difficult to take the notes and consider the
Oh,
topics at the same
Yeah,
time.
I just need the address to connect.
I would also echo Ms. Anderson's point that I think we had a
So
good recommendation pre-motion from Mr. Noon that it might make sense to recommend 500,000 on this project, but to change that, we would need to
No,
vote down this motion and change the motion.
I could offer a friendly amendment. Knock it down to 500,000.
On the wastewater treatment?
Yep.
Do we need to see some data up on the screen before we discuss perhaps amending the motion? Mr. Wellinghoff, do you wish to amend your motion?
Yes. Do I submit a revised, we don't need motions, correct? This is informal.
Correct.
Semi-formal.
I moved my $700,000 request for wastewater treatment down to $500,000, which would handle the subset of requirements that we initially discussed and free up $200,000 for other priorities.
Well said.
I'll second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. 500,000 to R20. Mr. Borden, what is next on the list?
We still have R15, which is a DPW, which is the big, that's 250,000. So right now we're at 1.5 mil. And then we have 17, 18.
Okay. My recollection was that after having voted R27, we had about 1.8 left, and now we've voted in another 1.5, which should leave us 300,000 back of the envelope. And Jason is going to update us on that and confirm that on the screen in a moment.
1.5 I have.
We have 500 left?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
is R15 the next one in numerical order?
That's the next big one R15 is the next one.
Okay. I will entertain a motion on R15, the building design phase of the fuel depot for the DPW.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Motion carries to approve R15, the DPW building for the full $250,000.
Mr. Chair, I'll just,
Yes, Mr. Wellinghoff.
I think we have 200 left, and I understand we have a couple more items to consider. And there's also that delta for the ABRSD, which would be 200,000 that we decided not to recommend. Is that worth reconsidering? I apologize, I missed that portion of the meeting this evening.
I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it is worth reconsidering.
Can you see the screen?
So what do we have left?
$250,000 left. We've 90,000 that we've not voted on.
Mr. Martin, would you like to make a comment?
There's a little bit under 2 million, so it's, you actually have $212,000 left.
This is not a motion, but a suggestion. I suggest we do funding our 17 and 18, and whatever balance we have, we restore to R1.
Second.
I'd second that.
I know it's not a motion.
You want to give it a motion?
It was a suggestion.
Move to recommend R17 and R18, and to give the remaining $122,000 back to R1.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
I have a question.
Hold on. Any abstentions? Go ahead with your question.
Mr. Martin, is it correct that the number that we need to get to is 1962?
Thank you for the note taking. I don't know
Mr.
that we
Chairman,
necessarily needed to make motions, but I think it
Mr. Chairman,
certainly forces us to vote our opinion. Mr. Cole.
in the interest of being anally retentive, I would like to move that we recommend another $733 to R1 so that we,
Well, we already said they would get the remainder.
but I gave a dollar number.
Okay. You didn't in the motion.
Very good, then we're all set.
We have to revote number one now?
Nope.
We didn't?
No.
Okay, so what's the total to number one?
422,733. And then we are fully funding R6, R15, R17, R18, not fully funding R20, and fully funding R27. And saying no to everything else.
Ms. Anderson.
Do we all feel comfortable that we have explained our reasoning behind each of these such that Mr. Martin can return to the select board and fully represent?
Can we ask Mr. Martin if he has any questions for us?
I think we have, and I think it is a prudent point. Go ahead, Mr. Martin. Any comments you'd like to make?
No, I think I understand. Yeah, this is, yeah, I can, yeah, so basically, you're not in favor of all the ones that you haven't funded, but, and with the asterisk that you're not in favor of ARPA funding for them. You're not necessarily against them in general, but you're not in favor of using ARPA funds for all the things you voted against. And for the ones you voted for, I think I understand.
Well put. Mr. Martin, would you like myself or any of the other members to attend on October 2nd, I think was
Well,
the date?
I think we've got 2 dates coming up. Actually, I'm not familiar with that. We're going to do October 3rd for ARPA and October 17th?
David gives you.
Yeah, the 3rd, we'll be looking at making some deliberations and the final vote for the next meeting.
So, deliberations on the 3rd, final vote on the 17th.
Okay. If you would like personal attendance or explanation, just please reach out
Well,
to me.
I assume that the liaison will be there, and so, you know, it's good to have somebody from the FinCom there in case there's a question.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. Ms. Anderson.
I would like to clarify, there are a number of items we explicitly did not recommend, which I think is in contradiction to what you said. There were some items that we thought very well could be funded in other ways, and there were a few items that we just straight out did not recommend. But unless I'm misunderstanding, there are motions we
No,
made to not recommend
That's a
certain
good
items.
point, and we should summarize that tomorrow and provide that list in writing for Mr. Martin. And we will do that.
If that'll be fine, but I don't think I'll go into them too much if you're not recommending them, right? So,
No, I just wanted to clarify because that was different from what I heard you say.
okay, so I can say in some cases it's because you just don't think ARPA is the proper funding method.
For some, and for
cases
some,
you're-
we just didn't agree
Right.
with.
Okay. Mr. Rowland, did you have a comment?
I'd say motion to adjourn, but I know we have some finance business to do.
We need to go through liaison reports and
That's
verify
it.
our next meeting. So, Mr. Rowland, since your microphone is on, how did the DPW meeting go?
DPW went great. You know, priority is phase one, which is which we just approved tonight, or recommended tonight, I should say, is doing the fuel tanks, doing that study, you know, signing out the building and the fuel depot. Locating the fuel depot to where it would not impact moving forward with building a new building so that it would be able to be used continuously. And it's also going to increase safety. You know, there is a concern with safety there right now. You know, police cruiser needs gas in the middle of the night, that's where it's going to go. So I know they're going to be they asked for more money. Obviously, we did that tonight. Phase 2 would be the DPW yard. Redoing the DPW building, that's phase 2. This is how we see it right now. DPW yard, I should say. Phase 3 would be the DPW building, and then a phase 4 would be construction. And then eventually, the transfer station piece of it at some point down the line. We don't see that being a major priority right now among the committee, that it functions. It could be improved, sure, and maybe we can do that out of time, out of the budget, normal budgetary process, that, you need to redesign, you need to move some things around, maybe getting a compactor that just does corrugated cardboard. Because, as you know, we see more Amazon boxes in this town and FedEx and UPS every day. People get more home deliveries, so that type of thing. Fuel tanks have a 30-year life, or roughly. I think it's more of a 20-year life, but they're about 18, 19 years old now, so they're bumping up against that time frame. The new design would be dual wall and containment system and everything else. So that's the law right now. If you put in a fuel tank, you have to have it has to be double walled. There's no way around that. And you have to have a containment system. So we want to get that. They want to get that done before there is a need that has to be done that on an emergency basis if a tank happened to rupture. So we need to get ahead of that. That's just safety concern for the town and for our environment. That was about it.
Okay. Mr. Cole.
The Boardwalk campus, the only items I would like to share are that as of the first day the kids were in school, there were 3,000 items on the punch list. As of the last school building committee meeting, which was 2 Wednesdays ago, so the day after our last meeting, there were only 500 items left on the punch list, with the expectation that most of them would be complete within September. Some might actually spill into October, but they don't see it going past October. The second shift is working on this until midnight, 6 days a week, to get the punch list completed when the kids are not in the schools. As you heard from the superintendent, there is going to be a grand opening celebration on the October 15th. I unfortunately am very unhappy that I'm not going to be able to make it, as I'm going to be out of town. So after years of being on this committee, I'm not going to be able to attend. I'm not going to be able to make the grand opening, which makes me really sad. I want you to know that 98.4% of the total expected money has been committed to date, which is fine because we are well along the paths of where we need to go. Yes, the tear down of the two other buildings is more than 1.6% of the total cost, but the money's already committed, so it's already accounted for and taken care of. GMP contingency is running a little low. Allowances are healthy. Owner's soft cost is healthy, and construction contingency is not great, but not terrible. That's all a way of saying that as we sort of squabble over the last little bits, we're in pretty good shape, and we're close to getting this completely finished. The only two things that stick in my craw from the last meeting that I want to just sort of complain about, because I'm never always optimistic. We had to pay an early termination fee of $170,000 for the solar panels that were on one of the legacy buildings. We didn't think that one through properly. And the other thing that pissed me off is we had to pay a $40,000 change fee because nobody picked up on the fact that all of the bookshelves in the main media center were fixed height and were too high for elementary age school children. And not only were they too high, but the shelves themselves were fixed, so you couldn't adjust them to have the larger books that are often seen in young grades. How we got this late in the project before it was found sticks in my craw. But other than that, the building is open. We're on target from a cost perspective, and our final MSBA reimbursement percentage, our total blended after all bits and bobs, is currently sitting at 35% and is not going to change much from there. So when you think about that school, just over a third of it was leveraged by the state.
Well done. Thank you. Any other liaison reports? I think you saw the planning board liaison report that I sent this morning. They had their meeting last week, which was a joint meeting with the town of Maynard to talk about the Powder Mill corridor and the proposed idea of having an overlay. They described it as a overlay zoning. So just to try to improve everything for all the stakeholders. And that open forum is tomorrow, and that link was sent out. With that, I will accept a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Thank you. See you next time.